Where's your sister? Oh no. Out in the kitchen, I guess. Hello, everyone. Trying to find a little bit of heavier paper that I can write on so that everyone can see what I'm doing. And I thought I had a Sharpie. But we'll bring this down here for the beginning. Hello, Moonchild. Let me give everybody a couple of minutes to come in before we get started. I have chose the yarn and needles that I want to use. Oh, you did? Good morning, Sherry. Is it on YouTube? I've got to listen to it because I'm like, what in the world is she listening to? I'm doing good. Hey, Chris. We're starting the knit along today, Chris. And we are going to be starting the crochet along tomorrow. Seagulls, stop it now. Okay, I'm going to have to check it out. I've got to write this down on the edge of this paper over here. All right, I'll check it out after a bit. The crochet along is going to be the hexagon cardigan, but we're going to do the granny stitch. I still haven't been able to figure out why that's bulking up like that. So I'm still working on that. So that might be something that we do at another time. But the granny stitch we're going to use for the crochet along tomorrow. Divine Light Designs, welcome in. UP, whatever needles you want to use, okay? I'm going to discuss a little bit of that as we're getting started here. Depending on what you want your sweater to be. Do you want it to be warm, which means you're going to have a smaller stitch? Or do you want it to be light and airy, which you're going to have a larger stitch? The smaller stitch, you're going to use the smaller size needle. Good morning, Cindy. Yeah, the granny square sweater. Yes, that's tomorrow. Okay. We are going to do a swatch. We are going to figure out your gauge, and we are going to take a measurement. If you're making it for someone else, you need a measurement from the widest part of their torso, whether it be the chest, the waist, or the hips. You need to have that measurement, and we will be on the fly here. So, on your yarn, it's going to give you a gauge swatch. It should. Yeah, mine's over here. It gives you this information here. This is with these needles. Now, mind you, we're going to do a gauge swatch. We're going to find the gauge on the needles that we want to use. You don't always have to use the size recommended on the yarn. Okay, that's just for if they have a pattern in here. So if there's a pattern, it says free pattern. That's what this gauge is for. Okay, and for that size needle. Now, like I said, you can use smaller needles than recommended. You can use larger needles than recommended, depending on what you're trying to do. Hey, Amanda. So, for mine, I want mine to be a little lighter and a little airier. So I'm going to use a size 10 needle, and we're going to do a knitting gauge, or a gauge swatch, they call it. So I'm going to bring my camera up here a little bit. And what we're actually going to do is we are going to knit a square. I'd like to find, I should have pulled the center out before, but you guys get to see the whole ugly mess. If you don't get it right in the center, half of it comes out just like that. But we're going to, this sweater is going to be done in stockinette stitch. Now, if you are a little more advanced and you want to put a different stitch in here, I'm going to show you how to do that after we do the ribbing edge. If you don't put a ribbed edge on it or some type of edging, it will roll. Oh, is she? Okay, are you guys on FT together? Watching me again, not talking to each other? I thought that was so funny how I found you all again that second time. I was looking around, but I couldn't find y'all. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cast on about 20 stitches, okay? I'm using a size 10 needle, but mind you, you can use whatever size needle you want. Now, you don't want to go down to a size 1 needle with bulky weight yarn. It's just not going to work. But 1 or 2 sizes down from the recommended size or 1 or 2 sizes up works just as well. It's going to give you a airier, lighter, more flexible fabric. So I'm going to do a long tail cast on, and I'm only got to do 20 stitches, so I don't need a whole lot. Is everyone here pretty familiar with the long tail cast on? I'm just going to go ahead and describe that for those of you who are not. Basically, it's just that. You take a hold of the tail, you pull a long amount out, and you start casting on. Okay? So, for this swatch, okay, Susan, I'm going to go a little bit slower with you, okay? Okay, and you're working. All right. So, you're going to take the tail portion of your yarn, and you're going to lay it over your thumb. The other portion that goes to the skein of yarn goes over your index finger, just like this. We're going to pull a little bit more of this out because we're going to put 20 stitches on here. Now you're going to take the 2 pieces that hang down below and you're going to gather them together, hold them in your hand just like that. It looks like a little slingshot. Okay? Then what you're going to do is you're going to take your knitting needle. I'm using circular needles. You can use straight needles, whatever you want to use. I like to use circulars because it distributes the weight between the 2 fingers. And this is fuzzy stuff here. So I'm going to stick my needle down in between my hand and the string, and I'm going to pull the string back a little bit so I can twist my needle up this way. Turn it all the way up this way, like that. You've just twisted 1 stitch on there. Okay? Now I'm going to hold that stitch with my finger here, and I'm going to come over here to the meaty part of my thumb. I'm going to run it up my thumb, and as I run it up my thumb, you see what happens. I'm catching that 1 string. I'm going to capture that underneath my index finger here. We're going to come over here to our other index finger, and we're going to run our needle right down the index finger. See what happens? We're capturing another string here. So we're going to hold on to that one as well. Come back over to your thumb, run your needle back down your thumb. When you do this, go ahead and capture all the string underneath your index finger. Drop your thumb out of that loop and snug up the loop by pulling the string that you dropped. You don't want to snug it up too tight. You want this to freely move on the needles. Okay, I will show that again. Down to the meaty part of the thumb. Up the thumb. Hold your yarn. Down the finger. Hold your yarn. Come back over here and go back down the thumb. Bring your thumb over like that. Capture your yarn. Drop your thumb out. Tighten it up. If you happen to drop your yarn, just figure out which one's the tail, back over the thumb, back over the finger, and collect everything back up. Okay? Now I'm going to go ahead and do a few more on here. If you need me to show you that a little bit more, please let me know in the comments. I will be watching the comments to make sure before I get started on this gauge swatch. And for those of you who are more familiar with knitting, I want you to go ahead and knit and purl. Knit 1 row, purl 1 row, which is called stockinette stitch. And work up a square of at least 2 or 3 inches in height. And anyone else who needs to see more of the knitting, thank you everyone for the follows. I know we're probably going to get a lot more follows. I did put this tutorial into on my profile page. This and the knit and purl stitch. I don't know if I've got 20 yet or not. Got to get 3 more here. Hold on just a second, counting stitches. I'm using worsted weight, but you can use any weight yarn that you want and any size needles you want, as long as it's going to work with the yarn. You can't use sock needles with blanket yarn. I'm showing everyone how to do a gauge swatch to figure out your gauge for the particular yarn and needles that you want to use. And then from that, I will tell you how to create a sweater from just the yarn label, knitting gauge, and 1 measurement. Maybe 2 measurements. So Janine, whatever yarn you want to use and needles you want to use, we're just working up a knitting gauge right now. I'm working with, again, worsted weight yarn and size 10 needles, which are 2 sizes up from the recommended size. And I'm just going to start knitting now. Susan, are you okay with this cast on? I want to make sure before I go on any further. Okay. All right, so I'm going to do the knit stitch. If there's anyone who needs to see the knit stitch, I will be doing knits and purls here. We are going to go, this is the knit stitch. We are going to go to the left side of our stitch. And we are going to go in through the loop and up the back side. We are going to counterclockwise wrap our needle, put a little tension on here, and pull your loop back through and knock that stitch off. Okay. If anyone needs a little bit more detail on that, let me know. And I will slow down and show you that stitch a little more. Now, if you want to make a sweater with blanket yarn, you can make a sweater with blanket yarn. If you want to make a sweater with sock yarn, you can choose to do it with sock yarn. Now, the blanket yarn, they're going to get theirs finished before we even get ours halfway started because their stitches and rows are going to be huge. The person with the sock yarn, they're going to be the last one to finish because it's going to take them a lot of rows to make 1 row. But you can make this sweater out of any type of yarn, any weight of yarn that you want. And that's what I'm trying to show everyone here. Okay, we're knitted across this row. I'm going to do a purl row, and we're going to keep going. I want to get you all started on the ribbing. And have that going before we stop today. A whole sweater with sock yarn, I've done it. I've taken lace weight yarn and held 2 strands together and made a sweater for my mother. It's the red one that's on my profile page. The red lacy short sleeved one. Okay, now for a purl stitch, we're going to go into the stitch from the right side. Come up here so you can see. And we're going to insert our needle from right to left. Again, counterclockwise wrap your needle. Put a little tension on, hold your yarn a little tight. I hold tension back here in these 2 fingers so that the yarn, no matter how hard I pull it, it's not coming through unless I loosen up. So put your tension on when you pull back through your stitch and drop that off. What I did when I first started knitting, after I wrapped my yarn, put my tension on, I would guide the needle back down and I would keep both needles touching as I performed like a U-shaped drop down and back up, still touching front to back side on those needles. And make sure you're bringing it back past the bevel to get true size. And then just knock that off. I don't pay too much attention about keeping it touching, but when I teach, that's how I teach it, because it helps to keep from dropping your stitch off. I'm also holding my stitch here so that even if I pull it, it's not coming off the end of this needle because it's secured by my index finger. Over here, it's not going to go too far because I got my tension. It's not going to allow it to go up the needle. So there's multiple ways that I'm using to keep my stitches on the needles. If anyone is having trouble holding the yarn, please let me know. Okay, we haven't missed any. Once we get this swatch finished, we will be able to do a measurement to see how many stitches per inch we are going to be able to achieve with the yarn and the needles that we have chosen to use. That's fine, honey. Yep. It doesn't matter which way you knit, right-handed, left-handed, continental, or English. There is no one right way to hold your yarn. It's whatever is comfortable for you. And when I'm doing color work, I'm knitting English and continental at the same time, one color in each hand. So I'm flipped over now, and we are going to go ahead on here with another knit row. And if anyone coming in needs to see this knit stitch, just let me know. Thank you everyone for the follows. Judy, Penny, and is it Jillian? All right, knitting across. Jillian. TikTok makes it so hard to see those usernames because they're faded out, but they make sure to brighten up those comments. I don't know why they didn't just run that all the way across. I mean, I can make the comments larger, but then I can't see. Okay, I'm sorry. If you need to, just listen and don't watch how. I'm not going to wash it first, no. I do always leave a little when I make my pattern up because I know it's going to relax and stretch a little. So if you make it to true size, which I'm going to show you here in a minute, it will be a relaxed fit sweater. So if you like your sweaters a little bit tighter, you can take an inch off and it will relax to where it fits nicely, snugly. So, yeah, Susan, we are making a knitting gauge. We are going to measure how many stitches in an inch these needles and yarn I will be able to make with my knitting tension. Okay? Oh, you've heard it all. I used to work in healthcare, and I worked some hospital, some nursing home, healthcare, and yeah, I was called everything but a child of God, for sure. Oh, yeah. So we are going to work this up to about 3 or 4 inches, which should be anywhere from 12 to 15 rows for me. Depending on what size yarn you have, it should be the same. If you're working with bigger yarn, it might be less. If you're working with thinner than worsted weight yarn, it might be more. So I know what my gauge is on a size 8, but these are a size 10, a US size 10 knitting needle. So it's 2 sizes up from the recommended, and I don't know. Let me, okay, yeah, that was Deborah's stitches. This stuff is really, really fluffy. So I'm going to have fun working with this. I bought it because I like the colors and it's just really lofty. So we are working up a knitting gauge. This is something that you'll see in patterns where it says gauge, and it'll tell you how many stitches and how many rows per inch. If you can make that gauge with the needles that they are requiring you to use, then your wearable is going to come out to the size that they say it's going to come out to. Now, if your knitting gauge doesn't match the pattern of the wearable that you want to make, it's not going to come out the right size. It's either going to come out too small or too big. Yes, I'm getting ready to do another purl row, and I will... I do crochet, Susan, and we have a crochet along starting tomorrow. But I do prefer knit. I like knit. It's less intrusive on my carpal tunnel. My hands, I have really bad carpal tunnel. So I'm getting ready to do a purl row here. Now, on the purl side, you'll notice, and this is what they call the back side of the fabric, it looks like a little lumpy bunch of dashes back here. I call these purl dashes. So, on the purl row, your yarn is going to be towards you, and you are going to put the needle in opposite of what you did the knit stitch. You're going to go from the left to the right. Okay? And then, again, counterclockwise, wrap your yarn and take your needle back through the stitch, knock it off. Again, from the right to the left, counterclockwise wrap, pull your loop through, knock your stitch off. Brick row. Purl speed bump. Okay. I didn't miss any comments, did I? Tight knitter and crocheter. Okay. If you knit tight and you need to make gauge, just go up in your needle sizes. Okay. Now on this pattern, it doesn't matter how tight or how loose you knit. We're going to find out how many stitches you need per inch. And then we're going to use that one measurement around the widest part of your torso, or the torso of the person you want to make this for. And we're going to figure out how many stitches we need to cover that space. It does look like a little brick wall stacked up there, don't it? Like masonry bricks. Now, if you use a variegated yarn to make sweaters and you want to put cables in it, your cables are going to get lost in the variegated yarn. Did I do okay with the purl stitch, or do you need... I wasn't sure who had asked for it again. I have another purl row coming up. If anyone needs to see the purl or the knit stitch, I've got a couple more rows. I can demonstrate it a little more slowly. Yeah. Thank you, Judy. This is the Red Heart Roll With It, and it's called Autograph. I like the colors in it, and I purchased it because I like the colors and it was soft. And I think I'm really going to like this because it's looking more purpley than what I thought it would. But we'll see how it goes when we get to working on a little bit longer, amount of space. So I'm working another purl row. Again, if anyone needs to see the knit or purl stitches, Jillian, it depends on... You've never knitted before. Okay. I would recommend that you start out with the US size 8 knitting needles and worsted weight yarn, which is a Red Heart, and I will show you on the label where to find your yarn weight. Have you ever crocheted before? And it doesn't matter if you start out with circular needles like I'm working with here, or if you use straight needles. Circular needles just allow you to put more stitches on, and for me it distributes the weight, and this is giving me exactly what I want. I want an airy, you see how airy that's going to be? It's going to be warm because it's worsted weight yarn, but it's going to be light and it's going to be airy. It'll breathe. So that's the point of going up needle sizes from what is recommended. Susan, it depends. Yes, the information about the yarn. The purpose of this knit-along is to show everyone that you can use any type of yarn, any size needles, and you can make a sweater. All you need is needles, yarn, and a measurement. And the information about the yarn for beginners. I recommend a worsted weight yarn, which if you look on this label, it will say 4 or medium. That is a worsted weight. Red Heart is one of the popular brands. And they recommend a US size 8 knitting needle for that weight of yarn. That's going to give you a nice closed knit. Jillian, if you already have yarn, for this sweater, you're going to need, depending on what size, let me pull that pattern up so I don't misquote this. I did link a pattern in my bio, but I will pull it up very quickly here. And I will let you know exactly how much yarn is needed for the worsted weight, which was to give you guys an idea of the amount of yarn you would need. And I referenced the pattern, is it the comfiest cardigan or my comfiest cardigan? My comfiest cardigan. It is on Mama in a Stitch website. I do have a pattern link in my bio. Get down here to the pattern. Okay, and it calls for worsted weight yarn and size 11 needles. And it looks anywhere from 400 to 800 grams of yarn. Small, medium, large, extra large, and a 2X sizes. And if we're looking at grams, we're looking at 390 to 750 grams, depending on the size that you want. Okay. So we're going to close that back out. But like I was saying, doing a knitting gauge, you will be able to, you can use any yarn. Snood with chunky wool. Wow. Yeah, worsted weight would be a good weight to start, which is a medium weight yarn and a size 8 needles. And we're just working up a knitting gauge so that you can tell. Now, my gauge is going to be different from yours, even if we use the same size needle, because some people knit tight, some people knit loose, and some people knit in between. So the reason why they have you do a 4x4 swatch is because over 4 inches, your average is pretty even. If you do just a 1-inch swatch, there's a lot of room for error, because you want to measure the inside here for your stitches. And it might be a little bit harder for me to show you on this yarn, but we're going to have to, we'll see what we can do here. I'm going to do a couple more rows and see how many inches I have. This is called Autograph. The knit along is going on right now, Jude, and if you want to follow me, you should be able, it should have a little red follow right up here, or touch on that little circle by my name and it should. I haven't casted on anything yet, Kitty. We're doing a gauge swatch. We're going to do a gauge swatch. I've given you guys the opportunity to pick whatever yarn you want, whatever needles you want within reason, because you're not going to make a blanket weight yarn sweater with size 1 sock needles. It's just not going to work out. But if you want your sweater to be warm, you want to use a smaller size needle. Like worsted weight yarn recommends an 8. You might want to go down to a 6. If you want it light and airy like I want mine to be, and you can see here, you can see through it, light and airy, breathable, but it's still going to be warm because it's worsted weight. I'm using a size 10 needle. Still going to have to do a swatch. And I think I cast on about 20 stitches to do this swatch, because that gave me exactly 4 inches across. So I'm pretty familiar with my gauge, but I'm doing this because I don't normally use a size 10 needle with worsted weight yarn. It's normally an 8 or a 9. But I wanted this to be a little lighter, a little more flowy. And the bigger you get with your needle, the more flowy you're going to have your project. So I'm just showing you many different ways that you can add things into, different elements into your sweater. If you want it chunky and warm, you want to go with a bulky weight. If you want it, you know, thin and airy and flowy, you want to go with a worsted weight or a sport weight yarn and use an oversized needle. So yeah, 20 just to work the knitting gauge now. Thank you for the tiny diny. Now, this can be used to make sweaters for your kids. You can make sweaters for baby dolls with this. It's just a measurement and knowing your gauge swatch with the yarn and the needles that you want to use. So I think after this one, this row here, I should be able to get my knitting gauge out and we can measure how many stitches I have in an inch vertically and horizontally. Horizontally is not a big deal right now, but you might need it later, especially if you're planning in any shaping. There's not going to be a whole lot of shaping to this for a beginning sweater. Most of the shaping is going to be in the sleeves, and we will do that together. Okay. If you are making something that has a size and it needs to fit, yes, you do. If you're making a blanket or pot holders or things like that, no, not really. But if you're making clothing and you want it to fit, yes, definitely. You want to do gauge. And any wearable pattern that is up to snuff will have knitting gauge in there. And you will have to match their gauge for it to fit properly. So gauge is always important when you're making wearables. So now I do believe I have enough to where I can measure this. Now if you don't have a knitting gauge, you can lay your tape measure down, isolate out your stitches. I'm going to have to see if I can't bring this up a little bit closer or bring my camera down a little bit closer, probably. I have a knitting gauge. You can measure your stitches within this little window. It makes it really, really easy. So let me bring this camera down here so we can really, really see. And this yarn is going to be kind of hard to see for you guys. What I do is I lay this down and I'm going to have to look around the edge of here and isolate off. Okay. Here is a vertical knit row right here. You can see the vertical V's in here. Maybe you can't, but I can. And what I'm going to do is put my finger right here, and I have to count the knit rows that are in here. Okay, and I have 1, 2, 3, 4 knit rows in an inch. So I'm going to mark this down over here. 4 stitches per 1 inch. Okay. Now, we can also get this information here for how many inches we have in height. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Looks like 5.5. Make sure you put your half in there. 5.5 rows. I'm sorry, I shouldn't have put stitches. I should have put rows. So this gives you your horizontal inches. This gives you your vertical. Okay. Now that we know we have 4 stitches per inch for me, I don't know if you guys have your swatch done up and ready yet. Once you figure out how many how many stitches you have in an inch, we're going to figure out our measurement. Okay, I'm going to take a quick measurement here, and this is going to be really sloppy with me sitting down around the widest part of my torso, which is my hip area. I'll get a measurement here. And I'm sitting in an office chair too. I should get up. But I'd have to move dogs and heaven and earth to get out of this chair right now. Let's see. While everyone else is finishing up their gauge swatch, I'll get my measurement here. My message has stopped. Chunky wool. I'm working on a sweater right now that I'm using a 5-weight yarn, and I'm using a size 9 knitting needle. And it's got cables and texture in it, so it really makes the texture pop. Yes. Georgia, it depends. Chunky wool needles for a blanket, it depends on what type of texture I'm putting in the blanket, because different needles are going to do different things. If you want your blanket to be warm, you want to go down needle sizes. If you are putting textures in there like cables and things, you know, you don't want your cables to be really loose, so you use a smaller size needle. So it really just depends. It depends on what you're doing. Now, if you tell me that you're doing cables, I'm going to tell you to use a size 9 knitting needle with chunky yarn. If you tell me you're doing eyelet lace, then I'm going to tell you to use a larger needle, like an 11. Because it's just going to open it up more. Your lace is going to be more pronounced with a larger needle, and your textures, cables, and the such are going to be more prominent with a smaller needle. Horde, you want to measure the widest part of your torso. So if it's your chest, your waist, or your hips, whichever is the widest area, that's the area you want to measure. Yep, Georgia, you're just going to knit a row and purl a row. This is for stockinette stitch patterns only. Now, if it tells you your gauge, it will tell you in pattern, or it will tell you stockinette stitch. But 9 times out of 10, if it's a cabled pattern and everything else, you need to do the cabled pattern for so many rows, and it should tell you that in the pattern itself. But for this one, we're just knitting 1 row and purling 1 row, and we want it at least 4 inches wide and at least 2.5 to 3 inches in height before we can take a measurement out of the center. And then you actually can take this out. So, I'm a goddess-sized person, and I am not afraid to tell you my measurement around my hips. I am 58 inches around the hips. So what we're going to do is write that down. That is the widest part of my torso. Okay, and we're going to do a little bit of math. I never thought I would use math after I got out of school, but thank goodness I did learn math, because I use it every day now. And thank God I don't have to do it in my head. So, because we are making a cardigan, we are going to divide this in half, because you need half of these inches in the front and half of these inches in the back. So that's 29 inches. 29 inches. Now, yours is going to be different. Whatever your number is up here, for the widest part of your torso, you're going to divide it by 2. Okay? Once you get that, because it is an open cardigan, we are going to have to divide this down again. We need 29 inches for the back of my sweater. Now, we're going to divide this in half again, Okay, so that is, let me just not try to figure this in my head because I'm going to give myself a headache. Get this calculator up over here on my computer. That's 14.5. Okay. Now, each front piece, because you have a back piece, and then you're going to have 2 front pieces. And then we're going to have, oops, this is all very rudimental drawing here. We're going to have 2 sleeves, all right? So our back piece is going to be 29 inches, and these front pieces are going to be 14.5. All right, so we have all of that figured out. These are our fronts. This is the back. We will have to take one more measurement later on. Hey, Witchy! At the fullest part of your upper arm. And we will make sure that we have a full enough sleeve. But we'll do that when we come to the sleeves. Okay? You can always do that a little later on. Mark it down on this piece of paper. That way you have it ready. Now, here comes a little bit of math. This is where we figure out how many stitches we need to cast on to cover that area. Okay? We need 29 inches for the back. We know that we have 4 stitches per inch. So we have to take 29 inches and times it by 4. So again, let's bust out this handy dandy calculator. Now, for my back, I have to cast on 116 stitches. Yes. Thank you, Kathy. Yeah, that's why you have me. This is actually, there is no pattern for this. I did link my comfiest cardigan just so you would have a general idea of how much yarn you would need for the sizes that were listed in that pattern. If you decided to use worsted weight yarn, it gave you a roundabout idea of what you needed. This is just a freehand pattern, and I'm going to show you guys how you can do whatever you want when we come to each stage, especially if you're a more advanced knitter. If not, we're going to stick with just stockinette stitch, knit and purls. You're going to get lots of knit and purl practice with this one. Okay? So, we can also break this down to where we've got our front cast on as well. We'll go ahead and do that now. And we have 14.5 times 5. Now, what we have to do when we are making, I normally wear a 2 or 3X depending on the size. So what we're going to do, we have to remember that with the fronts, we are also going to have a button band. Or just some banding around it. If you don't want buttons, you don't have to put buttons, but I'm going to show you the button band and how to put 1-row buttonholes in there and all nice and neat and pretty. So 14.5 will actually have the sweater coming just like this. And if we put a button band or a neck band in there, it's going to overlap way too far. So what I do is I figure out, normally I do a button band that's about 1.5 inches wide, unless I want to use big buttons, and then I'll go to 2 inches. So I take 1.5 inches off of the front measurement to allow that space for the button band. So we're going to take 1.5 inches off of this, which takes us down to 13 inches for me. For you, it might be different because of your knitting gauge and your measurements. So 13 times 4, which is my stitches per inch. So for my front pieces, I have to cast on 52 stitches. Okay, so we figured out what we need to cast on. You are going to do 27.5 hoard for your back. So you're going to take 27.5 times your stitch count per inch. And then for the front, if you're doing cardigan style, which is what we're doing this go round, you would divide the 27.5 in half. So if we take 27.5 and divide it by 2, that gives you 13.25. And how wide did you want to do your button band? 1.5 inches, 2 inches? So Horde, your back piece is going to be 27.5 times whatever your stitch count was per inch. Okay? You're going to take and divide this in half because the front has 2 pieces. You have to divide it equally between the 2. That gives you 13.75 inches that you need to cover, and you're going to multiply that again by your stitch count per inch. Actually, the 13.75 we need to subtract off for the button band. So if you want to do 1.5 inches on the button band, which is pretty standard, yes, my front pieces are going to be 14.5, and I'm going to multiply that number. Actually, I have to minimize that. I don't think I minimized that, or maybe I did and I didn't write it down. When you separate for the front and the back has to have the full half of width. The front, you divide the other half left over by 2, which gives you the inches that you need for each front. Now, to do a button band, you have to take 1.5 inches off so that your button band spacing. If not, it overlaps way too far and your sweater's way too big. So my 14.5, and I think I did take 1.5 inches off of there. Let me see, 13 times 4. Yes, I did. I subtracted 1.5 inches to allow for the button, which brings me down to 13 inches for each front piece, which gives me a cast on of 52 stitches. Where did I get the 4 from? 4 stitches in 1 inch that come from my knitting gauge, my swatch. I think I confused you, Susan. Are you okay now? Caught up? Okay. All right. I just want to make sure I keep everybody on the same page and in the same chapter here. So once we have figured this out, has everyone... Okay, Horde, you're lost. Your back, your total measurement was 55 inches, right? And that was around your hips, so that's all the way around. Now, if you're making a sweater and this is representative of your hips, the circle around your hips, you have to divide that in half. So you have half in the back and half in the front. So we're going to divide that 55 in half. All right? So we take 55 and divide it by 2. Oh, I multiplied it by 2. That's not going to work. Okay, when you divide that by 2, that gives you 27.5 inches. So 27.5 inches represents this, and it also represents this because you divided that in half. Okay? Now, we are making a cardigan, so it's open in the front, so this has to be 2 separate pieces. So this number represents this area here, and then it also represents this area here. But because we need this open, we are going to divide this in half again to represent this area here and this area here, the 2 front pieces of your sweater. Okay, this is the same math I did to help you figure out the lovely cable knit sweater that you were working on. All right, so we need to take the 27.5 and we need to divide that in half again, which gives us, okay, we've got 27.5 inches for the back. Then for each front, we have 13.75 inches. If you add all of this back together, that gives you your total 55 here. So what we've done is we've broke it down into pieces so that we can cover this area and then these two areas with separate pieces. Okay? Now, with your knitting gauge, you're going to take and multiply this number here, which is how many inches you need to cover for your back, and you're going to multiply it by your stitch count per inch from your gauge swatch. Okay? I don't know how many stitches you had in an inch in your gauge swatch. Thirsty today. Were you able to complete a gauge swatch? Okay, you've got 110 for the back. Now, because you have 13 3/4 stitches here for each front, that brings it closed together. You want to leave a little gap for a button band. So normally I take 1.5 inches off for the button band, and I make my button band 1.5 inches. Okay, so I take 1.5 inches off of the front count, so I have room. So that leaves me with 12.25 stitches. So I multiply that, which is yours here, 12.25. Make sure you put the 25 in there, because that 1/4 inch will mess you up, because every 4 stitches you're getting an extra 1/4 inch, and it will make your wearable too big. I made this mistake when I started making the patterns for the white sweater that I'm working on. And we are going to multiply that by your 4 for your stitch count, and that gives you 49 stitches. So you need 49 stitches cast on for your fronts, and what was the other one? 110 for the back. Okay, so this just lets you know the stitches that you need to cast on. Yes, Kay Buckley, you have a question. Okay, while we're waiting for Kay Buckley, Horde, are you okay with this? Oh, not a problem. You're wanting to do a house coat, so you want your house coat to overlap. Okay, so for Kay Buckley only, because this is a house coat and you do want it to overlap and do a little tie, what you can do is you can, it depends on how far you want it to overlap. Some of them have it to where you can actually tie one side to the other. You can have it overlap the full distance. So you would have, like for Horde's example, you would have 110 stitches for the back, and you could do 110 stitches for each front, and it would completely overlap. Lightweight yarn, you can use whatever yarn you want, to be honest. If you want to do like a lacy see-through, type of robe, I would recommend sock yarn and an oversized needle, and find you a really nice lace pattern. If you want it to be warm, you might not want to go with a really lightweight yarn. You can always do it if you like those big fluffy terry cloth robes. You can do it in a chunky yarn with an oversized needle, and it would make it fluffy. Okay. Well, one part you needed to divide and the other part you needed to multiply, so it's okay. But this is what I do when I create my yarns freehand. Your yarn is only heavy if you use the wrong size needles. Now, if you are working with bulky yarn and you want it to be light, you can do it in blanket yarn if you want to, which would make a really nice robe for the winter time if you want it to be warm. You're just going to use a really large knitting needle, like a 15, and it's going to make it lightweight because it's going to be lofty and airy, but it's still going to be warm because it's bulky weight. I've worked with so many different weight yarns and different needle sizes just to see what that's going to do or what this is going to do. And yeah, blanket yarn is like super bulky. It's like a 6-weight yarn, 7-weight. I don't have any examples of it right here because I think I gave my leftover blanket yarn to my daughter. But it's what some of the people are now using to make stuffies with. It is bulky, bulky, bulky. It's like a 6. Yeah. Judy, if you did your gauge swatch, you have to multiply your stitches per inch after dividing all. Were you here for any of the division of all of this? Okay, you know what you want to do now. Okay. If you have any more questions or anything like that, I'm always here. So Judy, you have to measure the widest part of your torso, and then we are going to take that number and we're going to divide it in half. Now, for me, 58 inches at my hips divided in half is 29 inches. 29 inches for the back, and then 29 inches for the front. Now, because we are doing an open cardigan, we have to divide the front piece into 2 pieces. Okay, and then we also have to subtract 1.5 inches to 2 inches for the button band from the fronts. So everybody's numbers are going to be different. The numbers aren't going to be the same. Going to be really lucky if they are the same, because you know the only way they're going to come out the same is if you knit the same and you have the exact same measurements. Okay, so what we're going to do, since we've found out what we need to cast on, we're going to go ahead and cast these on. Now, if anybody gets lost, I am going to upload this to YT later on this evening after TikTok is finished processing it, and it will be there forever. So you can always go back and look. If you have questions, throw them up in the comments. If you have questions after the live, you can always message me, and we will do this every Thursday. So, not this, but we'll be doing the knit along every Thursday. Judy, if you want to work your sweater that way, you can, but I'm not going to work it that way. So, what I'm going to do, I'm going to show you how I work the sweaters. I start with my ribbing. This is my ribbing on the back, and I'm not making any marks. Here we go. This is my ribbing on the back. This is my length for the back. Then I will put a little stitch marker right here and here where I've got the length for my back. Okay, as we go through, if you want yours longer, you can make yours longer. If you want yours waist length, you can make it waist length. If you want a duster, you can make it longer. Okay, I'm going to let everybody know when we hit key points, you know, this is where, you know, you should be, or this is where you need to do this if you want to do it that way. It's going to be a really tailored to you specifically cardigan. But I put stitch markers here, and then I figure my stitch count here for the 2 fronts. I leave my neck open and I knit the fronts right on the back. And I also pick up stitches here after I've sewn them together, and I knit my sleeves right on to the sides of the sweater. So there's going to be minimal sewing. The only sewing you're going to have to do is to sew the sleeves together and sew down the side seams. So I'll show you how I do all of this, how you can put patterns and textures and lace or whatever you want to do in here. Now, for the new knitters, we are just going to do a plain stockinette stitch, and that's what I'm going to do the whole way through, just a plain stockinette stitch sweater. Because I've got this variegated yarn, the color is going to do it itself. So, we are going to start here. We're going to cast on, and we're going to start doing this knit purl rib. I normally do a knit 2 purl 2 rib. It's okay. When we get to the sleeves, we'll work through it. If it's still too confusing for you on the sleeve part, I'll show you how to make the sleeves separate. And we'll do it that way, because I don't want to really confuse anybody. But yes, I will show you exactly. This is how I do most of my custom sweaters. When they have pictures, I can do pictures and everything in here. So, and I've got some more stuff coming up. Everybody's going to be like, oh my goodness. So, yes, we are going to pick up the needles and we are going to cast on. Is everybody ready to cast on? Everybody's got their gauge swatch, their numbers. Susan, I go live at 11:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. I'm on the East Coast. If you have an uneven number, we are going to add a stitch to that. Okay? That way we have an even rib. One stitch isn't going to throw your size off one way or the other. You can add a stitch or you can subtract a stitch. Okay. Not a problem. Not a problem. I'm going to pull out my swatch and I'm going to cast on my stitches. Anyone need to see the long tail cast on? Yes. Yep. Now, are you casting on, UP, are you casting on just the back? Thank you for the finger hearts, Shauna. Okay. Just wanted to make sure. Now, when we do other sweaters and things, I can show you how, and I'm going to set this up out of the way here for a sec. I can show you how I work the whole bottom of a sweater up to the armpit and then separate off for arm shaping and the such. There's all different ways I do sweaters to minimize the sewing. I don't like sewing pieces together. I don't. Now, as you can see, I've just pulled out a long bunch, and it's probably a little bit more than what I need, but it's okay. So, not a problem, Shauna. Kay Buckley, I do crochet too. I have crochet along starting tomorrow. We're going to do the hexagon cardigan. So, anyone need to see the cast on again? I don't want to do it too fast if anyone... Good. I'm glad. So I'm just going to get started here. Might be a little quiet over here while I'm counting these stitches. I really don't want to count all these again. I saw the comment about the 60s vest. That sounds like fun. You can do it with the same principles of this too, but you have to do it in a V-neck. You'd have to do some shaping in the neck. I don't think I have enough. I think I do. $65. Susan, I'm casting on 116. I think it might be Horde that's casting on 110. Each one of us is making it to our own size. I'm not sure what question you're asking, Buckley. I don't know what WTO. Oh, I'm sorry. I had asked 81 stitches here. If anyone needed, yes, I sure can. I have 2 strings. This one here on this side that I have hanging over my thumb is the tail end. This side here that's going to the skein hangs over my index finger. I have it like this, and then I gather the 2 strings together so that I have like a little slingshot here. Okay, and then for the cast on, you are going to go to the meaty part of your thumb and go. You don't even have your string on there yet. Oh, let me show you on the other end of this needle here. Oh, it's going to be hard to show you this way. I've got some other yarn over here somewhere. Here it is. To show you the cast on, because I've already got 81 stitches cast on here, and hopefully I don't forget. Let me write that number down because I'll forget it. 81. Okay, what you're going to do, long tail cast on, is exactly that. The tail of your yarn, which I've now gotten into a knot. The tail of your yarn, you're actually just going to pull a long tail and start casting on. Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Judy. And then you're going to lay the tail end over your thumb. This end goes over your index finger, and I'll tell you why here in just a minute. I put all my needles over here. Okay. So the tail end goes over your thumb. The end that goes to the skein of yarn goes over your index finger. When you bring them together like this, it looks like a little triangle. You're going to hold them just like that in your hand. Very loosely. You know, it doesn't have to be super, super tight. You're going to take your knitting needle, you're going to put it down in between your hand and the string. You're going to pull the string over this way just a little bit, and you're going to rotate your needle 180 degrees so it's facing the other way, just like that. And you've twisted on your first stitch. Now you're going to go to the meaty part of your thumb right here, and you're going to run that needle up your thumb. And if you watch, as I run my needle up there, you see what's happening. I'm getting that one string. I'm going to hold it under my index finger. Then you go over here to the pad of your index finger, and you're going to run the needle down your finger. Okay? You've got that string there. Catch it under your finger here. Now you're going to come back over to your thumb, and you're going to run the needle back down your thumb. Okay, catch everything right there. Drop your thumb out of that loop and catch the string that was over your thumb and snug it up. You don't want to make it too tight. You want it to slide easy. That way you don't have issues getting your other needle back in there to make your stitch. Okay? Again, meaty part of your thumb, up your thumb, down your finger, back down your thumb. Once you get the idea of what you're doing, you don't have to do the thumb, finger, thumb thing, but it's the easiest way for me to describe to you locality of where your needle is in reference to the string that you need to pick up, because there's like 3 different strings here, 4 different strings. You don't know this string, that string. So, up your thumb, down your finger, back down your thumb, drop your thumb out, snug your stitch up. Okay, matching scarves for you and the pup. Somebody sent me a picture, a friend of mine sent me a picture of a dog sweater that had a, oh, what's it called? A menorah. And it was on a dog sweater. She said, can you make me a hat with this on it? And I said, yeah. Okay, Pat, I'm going to show you a couple more times. Okay, up the thumb, down the finger, down the thumb. And I patterned out a hat for matching that dog sweater. Now, the reason why you have the tail end over your thumb and you're using this skein of yarn on your finger, I'll show you exactly why. I have studied yarn, and that's why I call myself the yarnologist, because I have studied yarn and I've studied everything about the stitches. The yarn looped around your thumb is creating these little secured loops underneath. You need less yarn to secure your loops, and you need more yarn for the loops that are actually on there. So when I do this and I go up the thumb, I go down the finger. When I go down the finger, this is actually the string right here that's creating my loop on the needle. Okay, this is why you have to have it over specific fingers, because you can have loops for days, but you don't need tail for days. Okay, but when you tighten this up, you see the one that was on the thumb, it is the one that secures the loop underneath. Pat, I will take the time to show anybody who wants to learn. Absolutely. And then once you get used to that movement, you know that you're going through this loop to grab this loop to make your loop. It just becomes like second nature. It's just like one fluid movement. Oh, this is just a worsted weight light blue, very plain yarn. So I'm going to set that over here just in case anybody else has any issues with the cast on. I can show that again. And I'm going to go back over here to my 81 stitches and get the rest of them on here. Okay, there's my 116 stitches. And my background sound. Are you still listening? Yeah. I hate having to answer that all the time. I wished it would just play, you know. Becky, I cast it on 116 stitches, but that was from my measurement and from my knitting gauge swatch. If you cast on 116 stitches, it might not be the same weight yarn, the same size needles, or even the same size sweater. Were you able to do the gauge swatch? Yeah, it is. It's really super easy. Really super easy. Don't be intimidated by knitting. All you're doing is making loops. You are using a certain size piece of metal or wood to make a certain size loop. That's all you're doing is making loops. Okay. Yes. I am casting on, and the only thing that we're going to be working on right now, Becky, you do knit, right? You're already familiar with knit and purl. It should be easier for you to catch up because all we're going to do today is, and we've already went past the hour. I didn't want to push myself too far, but I am going to get you guys started on the knit and purl. Before next Thursday, I would like for everyone to have at least 2 inches of knit and purl rib done for the base of this sweater. That'll be the homework. 2 inches of knit 2, purl 2. Okay? So what we're going to do is we're going to be swapping out stitches. We're going to be knitting 2, moving our yarn from back to front, and purling 2. So again, for all the new people, we are going to isolate out our first stitch, and this row is going to be a knit row. We go to the left of the knit stitch and insert our needle. And we are going to insert it in this little loop here that's made by the yarn wrapping around the needle, if it will zoom in there. Okay, so from the left of the stitch in through the loop and up the back side. Our yarn is also to the back or away from us. Okay, you invert your knit and purl. It's okay. It's okay. So again, counterclockwise wrap your yarn, and I am working with 2 strings. This is part of my weave-in process when I start. I'm going to do about 3 or 4 stitches with this. I'm going to pull our loop through, and I think I caught something extra there because it didn't feel like it wanted to come through easy. Yes, I did. Okay, there's 1 knit. Again, in from the left to the right and up the back, yarn to the back, counterclockwise wrap. There's our 2nd knit stitch. Now, we are going to do a purl stitch here. We are going to bring our yarn through the middle of our needles here and bring it to the front, just like that. Now it's to the front. On our purl stitch, we are going to go from the right to the left in the stitch, and our needle is going to stay to the front. All right, take our yarn, counterclockwise wrap our needle. This is where I put a little bit of tension on. I will tighten up the tension here so that this yarn does not slide, and when I do that, it opens up that stitch back there to make it easier for me to pull that back through. And this yarn is a little darker, and I don't know if that makes any difference for you guys or not. We're going to do a 2nd purl stitch and isolate that stitch out so you can see really well. And all I'm doing is going in through the loop that it's created by it wrapping around this back needle here. And I'm going to counterclockwise wrap again. Okay, you can see when I let go of these needles, I have a hold of everything else in this hand. If anyone is having any issues holding their needles, please let me know. Oh, don't drop stitches. I'll tell you the best way not to drop stitches, okay? Keep your index finger here on your stitches. When you do isolate out that 1 stitch, I still have my finger back there. So even if I do go like this, I'm not going to pull it off because my finger's holding it. Yes, that's all you need, Becky. You need to do your gauge swatch. You need to take a measurement if you're making it for yourself. And I need to take my yarn back to the back because we need to do a knit stitch now. So back in between the needles and to the back. We're going to isolate our stitch here for a knit. So we're going to go from the left to the right, and our needle's going to go up the back side. Counterclockwise wrap. Pull your stitch through and knock that one off. This row is going to be a little slow and fiddly. For me it always is, because it's the cast on. Sometimes it's a little tight. And definitely you want to take your time so you don't drop any stitches off. You are going to do a knit 2, purl 2, knit 2, purl 2. Just keep repeating that all the way across your stitches. Now, if you had an uneven cast on, like if you had an odd number of cast on stitches, you can either add one on your cast on, or you can subtract one to give you an even number of stitches, so that your knit 2, purl 2 rib. And I'm going to cut this little bit of tail off here, because I've done plenty of stitches now to weave that in. Way more than what I should have, but anyway, it won't show any bulk. So now it's just knit 2, purl 2 all the way across. Hold on just a second. Let me get this second purl in here so I know where I'm at. Jen, what we actually did, and I'll get you all caught up here, okay? We took a measurement of the widest part of our torso, whether it be our chest, our waist, or our hips, and we did a little bit of math. My measurement was 58 inches at the hips, so I divide that by 2. That gives me 29 inches for back coverage. And then I had to divide again, because we're doing an open front cardigan, because we have 29-inch space that we have to cover for the back. And then because we're doing 2 separate front pieces, we have to divide that 29 inches again, which gives us 14.5. Once we get this done, we have to subtract at least 1.5 inches or 2, depending on how wide you want your button band to be, from this total here, which gave me 13, because I'm doing 1.5 inches. So I took the 13 inches for the fronts and the 29-inch for the back, and I multiplied it by my gauge swatch. How many stitches did I have in an inch? Because I don't know if everybody's using the same yarn, the same size needles, or if they have the same knitting gauge. So we want to make sure that this sweater is going to fit who you intend to make it for. So we had to do a little bit of math to get started. Well, you might be able to get a sweater done if you hang out with us on Thursdays. Well, it's not a whole lot of math, and you can do it with a calculator. Okay, I will show you that again. Let me move this to the side here. All right. Melissa, have you already figured out your math, or did you just come in here just recently? Okay, Jen, you got it. Becky, I will try to remember. Message Becky. Yeah, because we'll pick up from there next week. And we will start with the other stuff. Now, when we come back next Thursday, if you want a pattern in your sweater, pick a pattern out, and I will show you how to make sure that pattern's going to fit in your sweater. Yeah. Okay. If you need help getting caught up and you want to work this sweater along with us, we do it on Thursdays. I am going to upload each Thursday's session to YT for future reference. If you can't make a day, it will be there. Yes. When you do the second row, you're going to knit the knits and purl the purls. So you're going to end up on a purl. If you have an even number, you should end the row with a purl stitch. And when you turn it over, it's automatically going to be a knit stitch. So yes, you're going to knit 2, purl 2, as long as you had an even number. Actually, your number should be divisible by 4. I've got to make sure that everybody ends up with 2 purl stitches. And putting this edge on there is just going to stop your sweater from rolling up. If you don't like a ribbed edge, you could also do a garter stitch edge where you knit every row for 2 inches. And as far as patterns and stuff, like I was talking, if you want patterns in your sweater, if you want lace, if you want cables, if you're a more experienced knitter, and you're not sure how to fit that in, let me know, and I can help you with fitting that in there. If you do want to do a pattern or whatever, the last row of the knit 2, purl 2, or actually the first row of knitting, normally if I'm going to do a pattern in there, I will do an extra row of just knit after the rib. I'm having a hard time keeping up with where I'm at. And I will increase my stitch count in that row if I need to accommodate. Okay, Becky, you have to measure the widest part of your torso, and I will put that in the message. Okay, I definitely will put that in the message. And you understand how to do the math? Or do you need a little message about the math as well? Let me see if I can't, yeah, my volume's off. See if I can't go ahead and send you this message now. That way I won't forget. Here we are. I found you. You're on your 3rd knitted blanket. Oh my. If you get to the row and you have an extra stitch, I want you to make sure that you have 2 purl stitches at the end of the row to be able to start the other row and keep your stitches the way they need to. So, have you reached the end of the row yet for your knit 2, purl 2? If you have an extra stitch and you have 2 purls and you have an extra stitch, I want you to back up 1 purl stitch, and I want you to knit or purl the last 2 stitches together, as long as you end with 2 purls. Jude, that is another platform. If I mention the name on here, they will push my videos and everything way, way, way to the back, and you guys won't be able to find me. It's 2 words. YT. They put them together. It's another platform that you can put videos and stuff on, and they're on there for a long time. Thank you, Becky. Yes, user 569. Do you have a measurement? And I can do your particular math for you. Don't you start that. My little one's down here. Jeannie, you can learn to knit. It's very easy. Okay, Becky. Do you know what your measurement is for the widest part of your torso? Yes, same name on YT, Sherry. And there is a link directly to my YT on my profile page in the link tree, which is right above my videos. There's a little link tree link. If you click on that, there's all kinds of access. Wonderstand. Oh, okay. All right, Jude. Okay. What you're going to do, you're going to take your measurement. That doesn't look like a really good N. And you're going to multiply it. Your measurement has to be divided. Divide your measurement by 2. Okay, and that will give you a number. Okay, the reason why you divide it by 2, that gives you coverage inches for the back of your sweater and coverage inches for the front of your sweater. Now, because it's an open front cardigan, you're going to take this measurement here and you're going to divide it again by 2. Okay, this measurement comes over here. Why is my pen not wanting to write? And you're going to divide it by 2 again. This gives you front measurement. Okay? Each separate front, because you're going to have 2 pieces for the front. Now, what you also have to do is do a knitting gauge swatch. You're going to cast on at least 20 stitches. Okay? And you're going to work 2.5 to 3 inches. Okay? Once you've done that in stockinette stitch, you can measure how many stitches you have in an inch across and how many stitches you have in height up and down. All right? This will help you find out how many rows you need for length and how many stitches you need to cover the inches over here for your sweater. Okay? Also on the fronts, you are going to have to subtract 1.5 inches for your button band. Okay, so you're going to subtract that 1.5 inches from the math you get from here and here. Now, the stitch count you get, you will multiply this by your stitch count, and the number you get from here after doing all of this math, you will multiply by your stitch count from your gauge swatch, and that will give you the cast-on numbers for the fronts and the backs. If you are still confused about this, you can message. Okay, you can message me directly if you don't want to give me the numbers on here. No, we are just putting the back on the needles for now. Just the back. We're just casting on the back. So, Jen, let me grab another piece of paper because we've scribbled all over this one. Okay. All right, Jen, are you still in here, sweetie? Your measurement goes all the way around in a circle. All right, and if you have to divide that circle in half for coverage over your back and coverage over the front. Okay? So, okay? If you can't figure it out later on, hit me up with a message and I will help you. Okay. Becky said that she might go live to help anyone who needs to catch up. All right. Yeah, all I would need would be that one number and I could plug in all of that stuff for you and I can tell you exactly what to cast on. But I want everyone to kind of be able to grasp this because you can make any style of sweater that you want just from this math right here. Okay. All right. So I'm going to continue on with my ribbing here. And if everyone is okay, Jen, if you need help with cast-ons, please let me know, because I don't want you to get too frustrated by the math. The math can be a little crazy. I would rather you focus on learning the knit stitch and the purl stitch than the math. So if you need help, hit me with a message. Just send me a message with your numbers, and I can tell you exactly how many to cast on. And we can work a little bit more with the math later, because we will when we do the sleeve too. We'll have to do the same thing again with the sleeve. So. But if everyone's okay and they've gotten through their first row and you've ended up with 2 purl stitches, go ahead and continue on, because when you turn it, your first 2 stitches are going to be knit. So as long as you ended with 2 purl stitches, it will always be knit 2, purl 2. When you start the row, it will start off with 2 knits. Okay. All right. Send a message and I will get right back to you. I'm going to work to the end of this row. And as long as everyone is okay and they're working their rib section all right, I will... Okay. All right. Marcia. We have started the cast on and all. What I am going to do, I will walk through with you the math here, because I just did it again. And I'll hang out here for a minute to make sure that everybody gets through their first row and started on the second row. When you get done knitting all the stitches off for the new knitters, all you do is take and put the needle over on this side and start with the empty needle again. Okay, you must know each other, Becky. We did a little bit of math, Marcia, to figure out, is it Marcia? Marcia. Okay. You are going to measure the widest part of your torso, whether it be your chest, your waist, or your hips, or the widest part of the torso for the person you want to make the sweater for. Okay? It could be, Marcy, okay? It could be a baby doll sweater. It could be a toddler sweater. It could be a preemie sweater. Whoever you want to make it for. One measurement around the widest part of their torso. Okay? Once you get that number, okay, we're going to mark that as, if I can spell here, that's your measure, okay? That's the widest part of your torso. Then you are going to take that number that's here and you are going to divide it by 2, because you need, as your body is shaped, okay? If you divide your body in half, you're going to need coverage for your back for your sweater and coverage for your front, okay? This is going to give you the inches that you need for the back and the total inches you need for the front. Now, because this is an open cardigan in the front, we need to divide that front again so we know how many inches each front has to be. Okay? So, the number that we got here, we're going to bring back down here, and we're going to divide it again by 2. Okay? That will give you the inch count for both fronts. Now, if you're doing a button band, we need to subtract, after we get this number here, after we divide, we're going to take that number here and we are going to subtract 1.5 inches from it. I normally do a 1.5 inch button band. Now, if you're going to use large buttons, you want to do a 2-inch band. So you might have to take 2 inches from here depending on your button size. Okay? So, this number divided by 2, after you divide it by 2, not this number. After you get your answer here, this is the one that comes over here, not this one. Sorry. then you're going to divide that by 2 and subtract 1.5 inches from it. That'll give you the inches that you need minus the button band for your 2 front pieces. Now you also have to do a gauge swatch. Have you knitted before, Marcy? I'm doing all this math and I didn't even ask you if you have knitted before. If you're familiar with the knit and purl stitch and a cast on. Okay. So, after you've done all this math, do a gauge swatch. Whatever yarn you want to use, whatever needles you want to use. Okay? Find out what your gauge is per inch, and then you're going to multiply these numbers that you have. This one here for the back. This number, after you do the subtraction here for the 2 fronts, you're going to multiply it by your stitch count per inch. And that's going to let you know how many stitches to cast on. Hey, Valerie. And that'll give you your stitch count for your back and the stitch counts for the 2 fronts, minus your button band. I'm doing good. We've started on the knit along here. Okay, this is how I do any custom sweater, any freestyle sweater that I want to do. Now, like I've told everyone else, if there's a pattern that you want to do, whether it be a picture pattern or a cable pattern or a lace pattern, have that ready next week and I will show you how to incorporate that into your sweater. And I will try to have this printed up a little bit better for everyone that might want to take a screenshot of it later for the formula to be able to plug everything in. Okay, if anybody needs help with this math, don't feel intimidated, don't feel bad. Not a lot of people know how to do this. And I wanted everyone to be able to make whatever type sweater they wanted to. And this will let you do that with any yarn and any needles. So I am, Valerie, I'm sorry, we were just about ready to end. I didn't think I was going to go more than an hour, and I'm already, well over that. We're almost to the 2-hour mark. I didn't want to push myself too much today because I'm still recovering. Yes, we're going to knit 2, purl 2 all the way across, and we're going to turn it around and continue on. All right, Valerie, thanks for stopping in. Yes, I will have this posted to the YT. If you go back to my profile page right above my videos, there's a Linktree link and a 2-in rib. It is a 2x2 rib. You knit 2, purl 2, knit 2, purl 2, all the way across. Are you okay, UP? What you're actually doing is you're doing 2 knit stitches and then 2 purl stitches, and you're repeating that all the way across. Yes, 2 inches of the rib, yes. I think I should be purling now. Yes, this one should be a purl. But yes, knit 2, purl 2, rib for 2 inches. That's okay. I can't type half the time either. Eastern Standard Time, Jude, I'm on at 11:30 a.m. If you have any questions, I'm normally here early in the morning. I haven't been because I've been recovering with this carpal tunnel issue. But if I'm here early in the morning and you see me and you have a question, just ask any question. If you need help with the sweater or anything in between now and next Thursday, if you don't see me live, hit me up with a message. Hey, Twisted. If you wanted to knit a sweater, we might have to catch you up because I'm getting ready to jump off. I know you're normally on here early in the morning. I can always catch you up tomorrow. That's okay. That's okay. It's all good. It's all good. Not a problem, Jude. I wanna share this so that, you know, the knowledge gets passed on, and hopefully, you know, you learn it and enjoy it and pass it on to someone else who really wants to learn it. And, you know, I want to keep this art alive. I don't, you know, I don't want it to, you know, be one of those things that, you know, nobody does anymore. Yeah. So, yeah, I can always catch you up if you wanted to. Yeah, Becky says she might go live to catch everyone else up when she gets in. So if anyone needs help after this, Becky's willing to do a live. Give her a follow. She can assist anyone and help them get caught back up. Becky, I was supposed to send you that information. What all information are you okay with the formula, Becky, on how to figure it out? Yeah, Twist has got live. Okay, I'll put the formula down for you. Hopefully you can understand it. If not, hit me up with a message and I'll go live, you know, a few minutes to briefly explain it to you. Yes, I am working on circular needles. It doesn't matter if you're working on straight needles or circular needles. I work on circular needles because it's easier on my hands. Once you start getting to knit a sweater, the weight starts to get heavy. And on straight needles, you have all the weight in one hand until you get it transferred over. The circular knitting needles for me seem to, and here I've got an odd stitch. I must not have cast on enough. I'll have to count these stitches again because I should have had 116, but I'm going to fix this so I got 2 purls right here because I'm going to purl in the front and knit in the back, and I'll fix it on the next row. That way I've got my 2 purls at the end. All right. So Becky, I'll send you over the formula. Yes, I'm working on run needles, again, simply because it distributes the weight a little bit better and it's not as heavy on my hands. What do you got? The knitting book. Which one? Nightmare Before Christmas or the Harry Potter one? Or was it the Friends book? No, you had the Friends book already. Yeah. Yeah, I can send it to you too, Twisted. Actually, Becky, I will send this to you because I know that you are still driving. You are going to measure the widest part of your torso. Okay, and that number, your measurement, you are going to divide by 2. Okay, divide it by 2. And you'll get a number. Okay? You are going to take this number and you're going to write it down here. You're going to divide that again by 2. Okay? This is the inches for the back. And then this would be the inches for 2 separate pieces for the fronts. Okay? Once you get this number here, you are going to subtract 1.5 inches from this number, and it will give you the number you need for the fronts. Okay, the inches for the fronts. If I can write proper. Inches for the fronts. Okay? Then you're going to do a gauge swatch. Yes, this is full torso. Whether it be your chest, your waist, or your hips, you're going to measure, and that number's going to go here. Okay? For anyone who wants to take a screenshot. I will send this to you, Becky, and this again will be on the YT later on this evening. Normally TikTok takes about an hour or two to process the live, depending on how long. Okay, and make sure you take 1.5 inches off for your button band. I'm going to write button band on here because if not, it's going to overlap too far. Okay, and then you have to do a gauge swatch. All right, you're going to take whatever yarn you want to use and whatever needles you want to use. Now, you can't use sock needles with blanket yarn. It's not going to work. Look at your yarn label. If you want your sweater to be warmer, you want to go down a size or two from the recommended size on the yarn label. If you want it to be light and airy and have good flow, you want to go up in a needle size. Okay? Once you figured out your gauge swatch, how many stitches you have in 1 inch, then you're going to take this number here and multiply it by your stitches per inch. And the same thing with this number here. And that will give you your cast on totals. Thank you, Becky. So, Becky, I will type all this in so you don't forget it on the way through. And for anyone else who might like this information, message to them. Send me a message because I will not be able to locate everybody on here and send a proper message. Okay, so if anyone else needs this information, message me directly. Just go right back up here and message me, measurements please, and I will send you the formula, or just type formula in a message and I will send it to you. Okay, it'll all be written out what to do, measure this, 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 and this is wonky because you can't see it now. Okay, so I thank everyone for joining me today. We will be back Thursday next week at 11:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, and we will start from the 2 inches of ribbing. So work on your ribbing. If you get behind, it's okay. I'm probably going to be slow going on this for a little bit. So I will be lagging behind with all the beginners. Sherry, you're welcome. Judy, everyone is welcome, welcome, welcome. Jude, you're welcome as well. This is something I've always wanted to do, share my knowledge with others that, want the knowledge. So that's what I'm here to do, and that's what I'm doing with my TikTok platform. So there's going to be all kinds of new things, and just I'm going to teach you guys how to do everything. Color work, put pictures in, names in, faces in, whatever you want to put in, I'm going to show you how to do it. So, Becky, I'm grateful for you all too, because, I could be just sitting here talking to my phone and, I'm just glad that, there's somebody on the other side that's saying, hey, I'm enjoying this, I appreciate you guys just as much as you appreciate me. I really do. So, join me next Thursday. If you have any questions, please message me. I'm normally message back within the hour. You will not catch me after 7 o'clock at night because half the time that's when I'm in the bed. I'm just old and tired. So, yeah. I will see you all next week. And if you have any friends that want to join, let them know. Knit along. Learn how to make your own sweater. So that way you're not dependent on anybody else's patterns. You can make your own patterns. All right, everyone. May all your stitch counts match, and happy crafting.